Hello everyone, Sidewin here, and today I am going to be talking about the Investigator class in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The Investigator is probably one of the most complicated martial classes alongside the Thaumaturge. And because of that complexity, I'm going to be separating this into two videos regardless of what subclass you choose. So this video is going to be covering the base class, then I'm going to cover each subclass in a separate video, because each subclass has far more features than most other classes. So I'm going to get started here. So these are just the base proficiencies of the Investigator listed out. The number one thing to know is the key statistic is intelligence. Such when you're building an Investigator, make sure your intelligence is 16 to 18, and I recommend getting it to 18. Then I have the base proficiencies listed. The Investigator is an expert in perception, reflex saves, and will saves. This makes it so that the class is very good at noticing things, very good at basically dodging out of trouble or worming their mind out of mental control. The class is only trained in fortitude, which can make it vulnerable to, say, poison. You're automatically trained in society. Then each subclass, called a methodology, grants a different skill, and then you get skills equal to your intelligence modifier plus 4. Then the Investigator can use simple and martial weapons, which means you frequently want to use martial weapons. And then light armor. It does not have access to medium or heavy armor. So that's one thing to keep in mind. This isn't a character that's supposed to be like on the front lines taking the damage. It also only has 8 hit points per level plus constitution, so this isn't a tank character, it's actually a support class martial. So now, continuing on, I'm going to start explaining the unique actions and abilities given to the Investigator. These are probably what confuses people the most with the Investigator, because it has free, unique actions at level 1 as part of the base class. And many of the subclasses also grant additional abilities, so it can quickly get overwhelming. However, I'm going to break this down, so hopefully this makes it so this doesn't feel very overwhelming at all. So the first action I'm going to be talking about is Pursue a Lead. This is the base core of the Investigator class, and it's a mostly out-of-combat ability, unlike the core features of many other classes, and especially amongst the martial classes. So to start, Pursue a Lead requires the GM to be helping you some. So if you are GMing for an Investigator, you should be relatively familiar with this, and if one feat is selected, you should be familiar with it as well. I will mention that as a highlight when we get there. So to start, when you're pursuing a lead, you start by examining a clue for 1 minute. This can be something like a dead body potentially, or a strangely open drawer, etc. And then, if you can figure out that there is something, you designate a creature as the target of your investigation. You can also designate a location or an item. The only thing required to designate a target of your investigation is that your target, you must know it exists. You don't have to know anything about it. You just have to know that something exists. Then, the effect of Pursue a Lead, once you have a target designated, is that whenever you attempt a check related to your investigation of the target, generally the GM selects what counts and what doesn't, then you gain a +1 circumstance bonus. So some example actions of what does count are perception checks and certain mental skill actions, like, say, using intimidation to scare someone into giving you information. Now, there are some limitations to Pursue a Lead. The first limitation is you can only have 2 active investigations. Basically, you can be tracking and attempting to investigate 2 different people, 2 different items, 2 different locations, etc. Then, you cannot have 2 investigations against the same target, unless you're unaware those 2 investigations are against the same person. So essentially, you can be investigating 2 secret identities without realizing it's only one person. Once you figure that out, it is probably only 1 investigation. The final limitation probably only applies in smaller cases, but essentially if you cancel your investigation, you cannot pursue it again until your next daily preparation. So if you're investigating 2 people, and then you run into a third thing you want to investigate. If you cancel person number 1 and investigate number 3, and then solve that case, you cannot just immediately restart investigating person number 1. Instead, whenever you make your next daily preparations after a rest, you can investigate number 1 again. Then the next action is Cluein. This is basically just an extension of Pursue a Lead. It's a reaction which has the concentrate trait. So essentially the way Cluein works is whenever your ally is attempting to investigate the same thing you are, you can use your reaction to grant your circumstance bonus from Pursue a Lead to your ally. This ability can be used once every 10 minutes. The other thing noted about this is your GM can add traits. So, for example, if you're communicating the information by speaking, the auditory trait will be added to Cluein, which can matter if, for example, you're silenced and don't have sign language. Then, the last unique action is called Devise a Stratagem. It has the traits Concentrate and Fortune. The reason I don't list an action cost there is because the action cost varies. So if you're using this ability against an investigation target, then you get to use it as a free action, meaning you are not spending any of your actions on using this ability. However, if you're not investigating whatever it is that you're attacking, then it takes 1 action. And you roll your attack before you make your attack. Then, if you attack that creature later in the round, you have to use that roll, regardless of what number that roll is. And in most cases, the advantage of this is you can attack with your intelligence modifier. However, there is one catch to using your intelligence modifier. You have to be using a weapon that fits one of the traits listed in that chart. So either your melee weapon must be agile or finesse, which are 2 fairly common traits, let's note. Or you must be using a staff, which is a strength-based weapon, or you have to be using a ranged weapon. Any thrown weapons must be agile or finesse. However, as long as you pick a weapon that fits within these standards, then you're golden. You can use your intelligence modifier. And this last slide I'm going to now has the different feats available to you as an investigator. And I'm going to go out of order here because there is one thing that modifies that listing of traits which are possible to be used. That's Takedown Expert. Takedown Expert lets you use weapons in the club group as well as the already listed items. So if you really want to use a club, this is your way to do it. There's also a more niche benefit to Takedown Expert, which is that non-lethal strikes do not give you a penalty. Normally you have a -2 whenever you're attacking non-lethally with a lethal weapon, but this ability removes that penalty. Now I'm going to begin going through the other feats. The Investigator gets 1 at level 1 as a base class feature. Note that certain subclasses do grant different ones of these, like there is a subclass that gives That's Odd, which is the next one I'm going to mention because it's one that's very GM dependent and requires the GM to be cooperating. Essentially, it makes it so that whenever you walk into a room, the GM has to tell you one thing that is being suspicious. Like, it's something that's off. Then you know where something is off. You don't know why it's off. You don't know how it's off, but you just know there's something weird there. If you are selecting this, please remind your GM of how this feat works, because it is probably the most GM-dependent feat on this list. Then going back to the top, Flexible Studies, it's a simple one. It just gives you temporary training and a skill of your choice during daily preparations. So essentially you get 1 trained skill per day that you can change day to day. Then I'm going to go to the feats which are a little more consistent, a little more investigator feats. One of them is Known Weakness. Known Weakness lets you roll a recall knowledge check whenever you devise a stratagem. If you succeed in a normal recall knowledge way. But if you critically succeed, you gain a +1 circumstance bonus to your devise a stratagem attack. And if you tell your allies what weakness you discovered, then they also gain that +1 circumstance bonus. And unless you're silenced or have some other thing that's going to prevent you from communicating to your allies, you should probably just tell them if you take this feat. Then there's Trap Finder. Trap Finder gives you a +1 circumstance bonus against all checks provoked by traps. So say being able to spot it using perception, being able to run out of its way using reflex, or your AC against an arrow trap. The other bonus is that even if you're not searching, you can notice traps which require the search action to see. The final thing is that at level 1 you can disable traps which require master proficiency in thievery. Then I'm going to go down to Underworld Investigator. Essentially, the background of this is your character used to be a criminal and is very familiar with criminals. So, first off, you gain trained proficiency in Underworld lore. Then, you can also use your Pursue a Lead +1 circumstance bonus on thievery checks related to the investigation. Examples given are like cracking a safe that has something you need in it, or generally just picking locks to get into things. Then the last feat on this list that I'm going to mention today is Undead Spotter. This is an uncommon feat from an adventure path, which means some GMs may not allow you to use this. It's also very niche. Its main advantage is whenever you pursue a lead against a corpse or creature within your reach, you can touch that creature to immediately determine whether the target is undead. So if you have a lot of undead problems, this might be a good one to pick, but it is niche in that way. It also gives a bonus to recall knowledge checks about undead and determining whether a critter is undead, because you can't touch some of them. But that's the entirety of the feat. And those are all the feats available at level 1. And this is where I'm going to end this video. If you have a particular question or comment about anything I mentioned in this video, please ask below, and thank you for watching.